some white pepper, and just a little bit of salt. And basically what it comes down to is making the dough so it stiffens up just like a regular pasta dough, and letting it rest for a few moments. I have over here on the stove, I went ahead and I made a chicken stock. And this is actually more along the lines of not just the chicken stock, but the chicken soup. I went ahead and I boiled some chicken in here, and I added a little bit of some carrots, some celery, and some onion, and a little bit of some dried thyme, and a little bit of turmeric, and a little bit of black pepper, crushed black pepper. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. Now, because it is a dough, even though it is a pasta dough, we're still going to go ahead and use the dough hook. The dough hook is actually made for your heavier doughs, like your bread doughs. So if you're using this at home and you don't have a dough hook like this, maybe even you have a handheld beater, the beaters will work fine. Once you get it to a certain point, though, you're going to have to take it out of the bowl and probably hand knead it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and crack some eggs. We'll put some eggs in there. Put a little bit of oil. It's about 2 tablespoons of oil to 2 eggs. We've got about we've probably got about a half, maybe a little less than a half of a teaspoon. The recipe, if you've seen the recipe that I sent out, it calls for a pinch. That's my pinch. And then it calls for a half a teaspoon of salt. I go ahead and I add those all together along with the water. Okay, 2 to 3 tablespoons of water. Okay. We're just going to go ahead and lightly mix that. You want to get in there and see how it's mixing. Increase the speed a little bit because we want the eggs to blend with the water. Really want it to kind of get a little bit like a creamy color to it. And you can get a little bit better picture if you get up a little bit closer there. And you see it's a little bit like a creamy color. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the 2 cups of flour right into there. And we're going to turn it back on. We're going to go real nice and low to get started. You don't want to start too high because then the flour will go ahead and shoot right up into your face. And as you can see, the dough is actually starting to form. As you can see, the dough is starting to form nice clumps. So we're going to add a little speed to it. I'm going to stop it here for just a second. So you can see how the dough is starting to form here at the end. Nice clumps, just like an egg pasta dough does. So we're going to scrape down the bowl. You can tell right here how it's starting to form really, really nice dough ball. It starts to form up. Realize that this dough is a wet dough. We want it to form with the rest of the flour. So every so often, just scrape your bowl nice and easy. And then it should come together really relatively quickly. As you can see, it's starting to pick up the flour on the sides of the bowl. Now, one of the things that we're going to do here in a minute, when this completely forms the ball that we want, we're going to take it out of the mixing bowl, and we're going to knead it a little bit, and then we're going to let it rest for a few minutes. The idea is what we're doing here is at the bottom of the mixing bowl, we're actually creating a friction. You think about it, you take your hands and you rub them together real quickly, you feel warm. That friction is the same thing that's happening at the bottom of the bowl with the mixture of the flour, the salt, now all the ingredients. And we don't want to create a temperature of the dough that makes it too elastic so that it will actually fall apart on us. It's nice and wet, and you can see it's perfect. It's really, really good. It's got nice elasticity to it. Just kind of what we're really, really looking for. But I want to scrape the bowl one more time. We want the bowl basically to come clean of all of the dry ingredients. And you might have to actually use your hand to get down into the bottom, because you can feel how the dough is actually wet, but it's just missing those last little pieces, those last little crumbs. We want a nice fine dough. There we go. And we want to go ahead and actually let the dough mix really well. We want it to knead really well at a low speed. Try not to rush the speed too much on the mixer, because we don't want to overdevelop the gluten inside the flour.
Okay, you got some questions.
Oh, okay, some questions. Fantastic.
What does turmeric do to the soup, like taste-wise?
So turmeric is a root. It's a root type of seasoning, herb, if you will. It's not really an herb, it's a spice. And it has a flavor that is a little bit pungent, like a pungent wild carrot flavor. So it gives that flavor to the soup. Turmeric is a very beneficial root vegetable that we use in terms of seasoning things. It's a very organic, natural root vegetable. And when you use it in a lot of things, not only does it give good flavor, but it also has certain properties to it that give us benefits that help with like pain and inflammatory type of issues. So muscles and trying to think, it helps relieve a lot of muscles and tensions in your tendons.
Okay, and then do eggs need to be at room temperature?
So typically I take my eggs out and let them sit at room temperature, usually about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, depending on what it is I'm making. Unless it calls for it, it doesn't really have to be. They can be refrigerated. Again, you're going to be putting them into the mixing bowl and you're going to cause that friction. So it really shouldn't matter. I just like to do it myself because that's the way I've always been taught. Any more questions? Okay. Okay. So now, as you see, if you look in the bottom of the bowl, all of the dry ingredients are gone, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. We take this nice little spindle off. We're going to bring it over here. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit of flour. Take it off the hook. Knead it just a little bit. You don't need a lot of flour, just enough to dry out the outer edges of the dough. We're going to knead that for just a couple of minutes. So we're just kneading it for a couple of minutes. And it's going to have a real nice smooth texture to it. Just like that. You can see that it's got a nice little smoothness to it, no real bumps to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put that right over there and let it rest. Now, prior to starting all of this, I told you I made a stock that I boiled some chicken off in because we need some stuffing for our kreplach. So in order, it's a win-win situation. You make a soup with the stock and the vegetables, and you take the chicken out and you go ahead and you make a nice filling out of it. What I have in here is the chicken breast, nice pieces of chicken breast, some red onion, a little bit of 2 spice blends that I made with the help of my wonderful wife when we went to a book event at the Chabad House through our community here, through Jewish Federation community here. It's called 52 Shabbats. There's a book actually written by an author that we came and saw. And this one is a mixture of paprika, chili powder, salt, pepper, a couple of different items. This one here, called Hawaii, also has turmeric in it as well, cumin, and a couple of other different items. I thoroughly enjoyed the event so much. I wish I had more of this than that I have, but it is what it is. You could add, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and add garlic, some granulated garlic. This also has some black peppercorn in it, the 2 spice blends, and a little bit of salt, but not too much, just a hair. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and actually blend these together. We want it to get to the point where it's actually meal, almost like a meal. Okay, so it's just like how matzah, when you crush up matzah, it becomes matzah meal. This isn't as fine as matzah meal, but it's perfect enough to utilize as stuffing, because what you can do is you can go ahead and take this and form it into a little shape. It's got just enough wetness to it from the chicken breast and the onions, and we can put that right into a kreplach, which is a beautiful thing. Now, we've let the kreplach dough go ahead and rest. And we have our beautiful stock boiling over on the stove. And if you notice on the stove, you want to keep it at a boil, a slow rolling boil. This allows you, when you put the kreplach in, the kreplach dough is going to be less temperature than the boiling stock. And so we don't want the kreplach to bring down the temperature too much. We want it to be able to cook appropriately. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the dough and separate it into 3 equal pieces. We'll set these aside here for the second round and third round. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down on the dough. The idea is to make a rectangle piece, but if you're doing squares, rectangle's fine. I tell everybody Make them how you like them. Make your crepe block whatever shape you want to make them. There's no right or wrong. And I just drag a little bit of flour on the dough. You notice I didn't sprinkle any more onto the surface. I don't want to dry the dough out so much that it won't cook rightfully in the stock. We want to try and get this as flat as possible. If you want to make a rectangle out of it, that's fine. Again, just a little bit of flour. This, I felt really kindred to this particular recipe tonight, doing it this way as a soup because of the cold weather that we're experiencing here, much like you're probably experiencing in Buffalo. I will tell you, our unfortunate benefit of the what I call the Great Lakes bypass, is your doom. When bad weather comes our way, and it comes from the southwest up to the northeast, it usually has a pattern where it says it's coming through Toledo in southern Michigan. And typically what happens is it crosses the Great Lakes, it crosses Lake Erie and heads northeast. And what's northeast? Well, Cleveland and Buffalo. So there you have it. So I have a nice little cutter that I use. It's nice because it impresses guests when they come over to have your crepe block, but you don't have to have a special cutter. You can use a glass if you want and just press real hard down. I personally like to use the cutter. It's a nice way to form the dough. I go through all the outer edges. And then right in the center, we're probably going to get two more. We're nice and close. Okay. So we take all this off, all the excess pieces, and we'll put that in a pile to save to make a little more. We want, those are looking really, really good. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a little egg wash so that we can put around the outer edges to go ahead and make sure that the outer edges stick once we go ahead and place. Let's see. I don't see any. Just checking for questions. So that when we go ahead and we actually, oops, sorry. When we actually go ahead and stuff the dough, so we got one egg, so that it stays in the shell when it boils. So I take one egg and about half a tablespoon to a tablespoon of water, a little bit more. And yes, I'm like my Bubby and my Polish grandmother. I don't do too much on measurements, a lot on eyes. So then I'm going to go ahead and take 2 fingers and I'm going to lightly go ahead and put a little egg wash on the outer edges of the dough. And again, this is just to hold them together, to create a seam. Some people say, well, why not just do it on one edge instead of both edges? I do the whole circle. This way it really, really sticks together well. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just like before, we're going to take my handy dandy little scoop here. So it's a little bit of a cheat. You don't have to use a scoop. Okay. Get it nice and stuffed in there. And just put it right out on there. In fact, the scoop might actually be a little bit too much of the filling for the size of the crepe block. So maybe half a scoop. And then we're just going to take the edge and fold it over and just lightly pinch it down. So we have a nice, see how the edges really, really bound together with the egg wash. And we're going to go ahead and do another one. Nice little half moon shape. It's easy if you put it on just one half of the moon and then just go ahead and bring the edges over the stuffing. If it starts to stick, take a little bit of flour on the tips of your fingers. It's okay. There's plenty of egg wash on the edge. Just like that. Now, most people take to doing kreplach with beef. That's pretty much when I was growing up, everywhere I went, I ate beef kreplach. But nowadays, with people being more healthy and not many people, there's so many different types of diets that a lot of people don't eat as much beef as they used to. So chicken or maybe even a savory cheese filling or even a plant-based filling works as well. You could take some potatoes and some onions and some carrots, kind of like making cholent almost, sweet potatoes if you wanted, and going ahead and cooking off the potatoes, obviously, and putting all that into a food processor and process all that up and have a nice filling that you could put into a shell like this, and it would be fantastic. And again, you know, just be careful, I would say, maybe at your portion size of the filling going into the dough. Like I said, all the handy dandy little scoops don't always necessarily work. So go with what you know.
Chef, there's a question if you can use water instead of the egg wash.
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. The egg wash, you know, eggs are just a binder. And some people, in fact, because of the cholesterol and fat in the eggs and the yolk, prefer to even use egg whites, which is just the same. Water works fine. The idea is that you're taking a dough that the dough itself actually has quite a bit of wetness to it. And you really just want it to stick together real well. And you'll see in the water, I wouldn't be surprised, even with the egg wash, if one or two of these actually still open. It's just the way it happens. Because even the egg wash, it's just a quick binder. It's like putting two ends of a Band-Aid together. It's good for now, but it's not going to last forever. And once you apply heat to it, of course, well, that changes everything. So now we've got these wonderful little pillows of filling. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put them in one by one right into the stock. And you want, like I said, a rolling boil. And the idea is to go ahead and cook these for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then they're ready. You can enjoy them. You notice we just added, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 of the kreplach to the stock, and the stock had a nice rolling boil to it. And as soon as we added the kreplach right to it, you'll notice that it seemed like it stopped boiling a little bit, which is going to happen, which is okay, because it'll start boiling again in a few minutes. So we're going to go ahead and make a couple of more kreplach. Go ahead and flatten this dough out really, really well. And then we're going to go ahead and roll it out just like before. So there was a question. There is a question from the production manager. She wants to know what else you can use these for other than just soup. Well, the first time that we did this, we actually fried them. And I was explaining how when you fry these, there's a couple of different ways you can fry them. You can pan fry them, you can shallow pan fry them, or you can just go ahead and put them right into a hot bath of oil, like deep fry. And I suggest if you're going to deep fry them, go ahead and put a little breading on them if you want. Give them a little crunchiness on the outside of the dough, and make it become an appetizer. A lot of places nowadays, they do that with, I think it's Olive Garden does a fried ravioli, and it's breaded. So this would be like the same thing.
What would the meat moisture be made of?
What is the, I'm sorry, what was it?
What would the meat moisture be made of?
The meat moisture, the filling? If it's the filling, if the question's about the filling, the meat moisture is, well, the chicken itself has a natural fats in it. And we went ahead and boiled that, cooked it in and made the stock. And when we took it out, there was a certain amount of moisture still in the chicken. You don't want to overcook the chicken because you want it still to be a little bit juicy. And we added a raw red onion to it too. And onions have a predominant amount of moisture to them. Well, there might be another question. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't see it.
Okay, well, go take a look.
Okay, if we prep the cheese filling as noted in the email, it seems filling the dough discs would be a challenge. Any advice?
Okay, what was the question again?
So if you prep the cheese in the recipe that you gave in the email,
okay,
it seems that filling the dough with it would be a challenge because the cheese probably is not solid.
So what I would suggest doing is if you prep the cheese filling in advance, there's no problem with that. Maybe do one of two things. Number one, you can put it in the refrigerator overnight. That might help. That should help. Or you can even, before you get ready to use it, put it in the freezer for about 15 minutes. And it should actually kind of coagulate to a point where it becomes more like a spreadable butter. And that way you should be able to go ahead and use it as a filling at that point. And then if it still gives you difficult, I would just add a little more time in the freezer it won't change the consistency of the filling. It's not like you're freezing it overnight, but freezing it will help give it a little firmness to it. And then like you should be able to take a spoon and basically, like I said, put a spoon to it and spread it like butter.
Good suggestions, thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes, believe it or not, us chefs rely on good old-fashioned know-how from our grandmothers and our mothers' mothers. You know, what I was told used to be old myths or mysteries of the kitchen. Little things like that really help out. And actually, it's really too, I mean, what my grandmother used to teach me was a little bit of common sense helps out as well, because I mean, if you think about it, we know that when we have butter, and butter starts as a liquid, and then it becomes a solid, and then when we get it, because we take it from the cream, from the milk of the cow, and then we take it and we want to melt it, so we make it a liquid again. Well, after we melt it and it becomes a liquid again, then we decide, well, you know what? We have some of this, maybe we're making a compound butter, like a garlic butter, and we didn't use it all, so we don't want to throw it away, of course. What do we do with it? Well, we put it back into the refrigerator, and what happens? It coagulates, it becomes a solid again. So cheese is like pretty much the same way in that respect. And if you're making a cheese filling, it probably will coagulate back into the refrigerator into a solid form again. Now, I didn't put a recipe together for the chicken filling. It's about 2 to 3 cups of, if you look, I might have actually took a shot. I sent one of the recipes might have been cheese, one might have been meat. I think it's 2 cups of 2 cups of meat, some onion, and I think a little bit of salt, pepper, and actually, I believe it or not, I think a little bit of cinnamon too. My memory recalls correctly, which gives it a nice kind of Middle Eastern flair to it. So, all I did was I took 2 chicken breasts in order to make basically about a half a gallon of stock, and about 2 stalks of celery, half of a white onion. I use Vidalia because it's a sweet onion. It's less pungent. And handful of baby carrots. To be honest with you, it was probably about no more than a cup. And then, of course, I added raw red onion to the chicken when I went ahead and I put it into the food processor.
There's a couple more questions here.
Okay. All right.
One was, can the dough be made in advance and then refrigerated?
Yes, and actually, like in the recipe itself, it actually says to make the dough and let it rest for about 20 minutes. This is like a pasta dough, and most pasta doughs, so this has oil in it with eggs. It doesn't have butter in it or margarine. So when you put it in the refrigerator, it's not going to get hard like a lot of cookie doughs will. When we make Hamantaschen dough later on in the series, I believe we're making Hamantaschen later in the series. When we do, you'll see that dough actually has to go into the refrigerator so it gets hard, because you want that butter flavor, that butter cookie-like flavor. the recipe that I have, that it's not a yeast raised type of cookie. It's a butter flavor. And so you want that to go in the refrigerator and get hard. This dough is more like a pasta dough. It'll remain soft. You can make it a couple of days in advance and put it in your refrigerator. If you want, you can take it. I would suggest take your balls of dough and flatten them out and maybe square them off so you have a nice firm square, and then go ahead and wrap it in saran wrap it in wax paper, put it in a Ziploc bag, and just mark the date on it and put it in the freezer, and it'll last 6 months to a year. That's the greatest thing about most pasta doughs, is that they have quite a long shelf life, especially if they're frozen. So what we're going to do, real simple, is now if you come over here, you'll see this is the wonderful result of our crepe block. They've been in here for about 15 to 20 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one more question. Hold on just a second. Is the meat cooked before filling? Yes. Even if you don't use chicken like I did tonight, I would highly suggest going ahead if you're using beef, if you're using lamb, if you're using fish, go ahead and cook the meat off. I say to make sure that once the meat is cooked, take it out, and of course, try not to overcook it, because we still want some juiciness to it. That's going to help creating the filling. And once it's cooked and you take it out, maybe let it rest a little bit so you can actually handle it, to cut it up and put it in the food processor. But you want to use it. You want to be able to put it into the food processor while it's still warm, because that warm temperature helps create the moisture in the filling that we're looking for. And so what I wanted to do is simply this. I want to go ahead, if you can get a close-up, Miss Production Manager. If you can get a close-up, you'll see how the dough is nice and soft and boiled just like a nice noodle. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring it over here, and we're going to just gently cut into it ever so nice. See how nice and soft it is, and nice and cooked. Doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. So you can get it from that angle, and you see how everything, the dumplings stay together real nice. The filling's nice in there. It's beautiful. And that is chicken crepe block. Anybody have any more questions? Okay. No, it's not they're not a quiet group. Trust me, they're doing wonderful. If you here's something too. So when we get to this here, when we get to this point here, we've already got this made. As you can see, it's probably boiled down. What I will tell you to do is to go ahead, because when you're creating chicken stock, some people use it's okay. Some people use a store-bought stock, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It depends on how much you're making. But when it starts to boil down and reduce, it doesn't matter if you're making it homemade like I did, or you're using a store-bought product. When you reduce something, you're actually bringing more power to the flavor of the soup. So what I always do is I always go ahead and I add about a cup to a cup and a half of water. It's not going to hurt the flavor of the stock, because this is going to boil a little bit longer and it's going to reduce a little bit more. When you get done with the crepe block in the soup, and you come over here and you say, oh, I got more crepe block that's made. This recipe, I couldn't give you an exact number of how many you're going to make. I'm going to guess right around 30 to 36. So probably right about 3 dozen of these nice little half moon Kreplechs. Okay. If you're not going to, if you made all these and you realize, what do I do with these now? Again, you can go ahead and wrap these up in some saran wrap, put them in a Ziploc bag, go ahead and label them and put them in the freezer. And these also literally will last a good 6 months, maybe not a year, because it's got a chicken filling. And we typically, even though it's cooked, we still typically want to use it within a 6-month period, just to ensure that there's no cross-contamination, there's no freezer burn, any of those things. And we want to use it too because it's a good quality product. So chicken Kreplech in the middle of a cold winter's night. It's been my pleasure. Katie, I'm going to take it back to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chef. I know that made me like want to have some soup right now. Everybody that's in Buffalo knows how chilly it is and only getting worse by the end of the week. But thank you again. And I love just all the tips and tricks. And, you know, I mean, like, I think we were speaking before and it's like, we could just pick up a recipe and try something new, but it's just really wonderful how you kind of talk us through everything and we get to see how it's done. And I love some of the stories that go along with it of your bubby and all of that. So it's always wonderful hearing from you. And I appreciate you joining us monthly for these little cooking demos. So looking forward to next month. I don't have it in front of me what it is, but I know it's on Wednesday, March 1st. So hopefully you guys will all join us. I want to say that might be the Hamantaschen.
It is the Hamantaschen, which happens to be one of my favorites because I do a little bit different Hamantaschen than most people do. Although nowadays, if it's been done once, it's been done a million times probably. So, but it's an honor to be here with all of you. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Well, we'll see you next month. Have a good night, everybody. Stay warm.
Stay warm.
Thank you. It was great.